At Christmas, while I was working a double shift at the ER, my family took my 7-year-old daughter, pressed a black marker to her forehead, branded her a liar, hung a cardboard sign around her neck that said, "Family Disgrace," and left her hungry in the corner for hours. I didn't cry when I found her shaking. I didn't scream. I just held her and something inside me snapped. 2 days later, those same people were blowing up my phone, hysterical, begging, accusing, demanding. Funny how quickly abusers become victims when consequences finally knock on their door. My name is Maxton Vale, and this is the part of my life I never thought I'd say out loud. But before I share my story with you, I want to know you're here with me. Just say "listening" in the comments, or tell me where you are. I love seeing how far my story reaches. Sometimes even the smallest connection makes a wound feel a little lighter. And if my story touches you, hit subscribe. It helps more than you know, especially for someone trying to rebuild from the kind of betrayal that shakes you to your core. Thank you. And now, here's my story. I spent Christmas Eve the way I always did, under fluorescent lights, patching up strangers while holiday music echoed through the ER. By 5 p.m., I'd treated a heart attack triggered by a family reunion, a drunk kid who hit black ice, and a little girl burned by a sparkler. Every family I returned a child to reminded me of Hazel in Fort Collins wearing her red dress without me there. During a short break, I called her. She appeared in that glittery headband she loved, the decorated living room behind her glowing the way my childhood never did. "I wish you were here," she whispered. Guilt tightened my chest. "If I can, I'll come by later. If not, we'll have our own Christmas." Deal," she said, trying to smile before Linda's voice snapped at her from off-screen. When the call ended, the usual messages rolled in: Linda reminding me about Dad's prescription, Brielle asking me to cover Jace's winter camp, Connor claiming his truck repair needed my help. Different people, same pattern: me as the family wallet. I answered vaguely and went back to work, trying not to think about years of being the invisible middle child who managed everything so others didn't have to. Around 9, after stabilizing another cardiac patient, Sam walked over and handed me a coffee. "Go home," he said. "I'll finish your shift. You covered Thanksgiving for me. Your kid deserves a Christmas with her father." No one ever gave me time. I stood in the locker room, coat half zipped, debating whether to call my mother. But Hazel's voice, "I wish you were here," settled it. I left without warning them, stepped into the snowy night, and drove toward Fort Collins with something rare in my chest. Hope that tonight might finally feel like family. Lakeview Ridge looked like a postcard when I arrived, lights glowing, snow falling soft. But inside my parents' house, the first thing I saw was the Christmas tree lying sideways, ornaments shattered, stains on the carpet. I called out, but only laughter drifted from the dining room. In the dining room, everything was disturbingly normal. Linda eating pie, sipping cider, Brielle touching up her hair, Connor telling a story. Jace and Maddie sat neatly beside them, plates full. What happened? "Where's Hazel?" Linda barely looked up. "Hazel caused it. Go see." I found her in the back hallway facing the wall. When she turned, my breath caught. Her dress was torn, her knees scraped, her eyes swollen, and across her forehead someone had written "liar" in black marker. Around her neck hung a cardboard sign, "Family Disgrace." She ran into me sobbing. I carried her back to the dining room. "You're all eating while she's like this," Linda replied calmly. She lied. We showed her what she is. Brielle added. "She knocked down the tree and blamed Jace. My son doesn't lie." Hazel shook her head against my chest. "He told me to climb. He said he'd hold the chair. Then he pushed me." Jace stared at his plate. I asked why they always believed him, but never her. No one answered. Instead, Ray muttered about responsibility, and Connor said Hazel needed the lesson. I took out my phone and photographed everything: her forehead, the sign, the scratches, the table full of untouched food. Ray snapped, "What are you doing, making sure this doesn't get rewritten tomorrow?" Hazel tugged my sleeve. "Dad, I'm hungry." My stomach dropped. "Has she eaten?" Linda shrugged. She could have if she'd told the truth. "There's food in the kitchen." That was it, the moment something in me went cold and final. I buttoned Hazel's coat slowly in full view of the table. "Hazel isn't guilty. But even if she were, none of you have the right to treat her like this, Linda scoffed. You're too soft. That's the problem. No, I said. The problem is this family. I carried Hazel to the front door. Before stepping outside, I looked back once. You'll remember this night, I said, because it's the night you lost us. Then I walked out into the snow, the door closing behind us on the sound of their laughter. Hazel fell asleep in the back seat before we even reached Denver. When I carried her upstairs, the apartment felt almost too quiet after the chaos of my parents' house. I set her on a kitchen chair, warmed leftovers, and let her eat slowly, tears dropping into her plate. I kept my voice soft, asking about the snow and the movie she wanted to watch tomorrow, anything to remind her she was safe now. In the bathroom under the light, the damage was clearer, the red imprint on her forehead where the marker had pressed too hard, the bruise shaped like fingers on her arm, the scratches on her legs. I swallowed everything I felt and took photos one by one. When she curled into bed, I slid my phone beneath the frame and started recording. Hazel, I said gently, I want you to tell me everything, so no one can ever say you imagined it. She nodded, voice trembling. She told me Jace said an ornament was crooked and asked her to climb because she was smaller. He pulled a chair over, promised to hold it, then pushed her side. She fell, the tree fell, ornaments shattered. When everyone ran in, he pointed at her and blamed her. She whispered how Brielle called her a nasty liar, how Linda said she embarrassed the family, how the sign was hung on her neck, how she begged them not to write on her face but was held down anyway. How Ray and Connor made her stand in the corner without food. I held her until she stopped shaking. You told the truth, I said. You didn't do anything wrong. But while comforting her, my mind cataloged every detail, who did what, who said what, because I already knew tomorrow my family would rewrite the story. Memory crept in, another Christmas, another accusation. Connor tossing a baseball indoors, a vase shattering, Linda looking straight at me though I was in the kitchen. I still remembered the floor I knelt on, the dessert I wasn't allowed to eat. Shame, disgrace, words thrown at me for years. Now they'd been carved literally onto my daughter. When Hazel finally slept, I listened to the recording at the kitchen table, writing everything down like a report time, people involved, injury statements. The truth hit me harder than anything that happened tonight. This wasn't an isolated moment. This was the same pattern I'd survived now, repeating through her. I walked to Hazel's door. Under the nightlight, the faint shadow of the word liar was still visible. For years I told myself my family would be different with grandkids. I knew now they never changed. Only I could. Back in the kitchen, I opened my laptop and typed Colorado CPS report child abuse. The page loaded. Every child deserves safety. And for the first time I realized protecting Hazel meant confronting the very people who raised me. Christmas morning, Hazel slept late, finally rested. I made pancakes, hot chocolate, let her open the art set I'd hidden. For a little while she was just a kid, not a child who'd been punished and starved the night before. Then I drove her to Denver General. A colleague in pediatrics examined her. Photos were taken again, forehead, arm, knees. Hazel answered questions quietly, but clearly. When the doctor printed the report, he hesitated before handing it over. This meets criteria for emotional abuse and physical endangerment, he said. I nodded, gripping the paper harder than I meant to. Back home, I placed the report on the table. It felt heavier than it looked. I pulled out 3 Christmas envelopes I had never delivered, 2 Disneyland packages for my siblings' families, a spa weekend for my parents. Each one was something I'd bought working overtime. I sat down, tore every ticket into confetti, and sealed them back inside. Then I opened my banking app and canceled everything: Linda's medication support, Ray's roof repairs, Jace's winter camp payment, Maddie's activities, Connor's truck repair, every auto transfer I'd kept alive for years. Then the calls came. Brielle screamed first. What is this? You ruined our trip, Connor yelled about his truck. Linda called me ungrateful. Ray said I was betraying the family. I waited for one question, just one, about Hazel. It never came. When the apartment finally went quiet, Hazel sat drawing at the coffee table. She held up a picture of 2 stick figures under a straight Christmas tree. That us? I asked. She nodded. The tree doesn't fall this time. That was enough to steady me. When she went to sleep, I opened my laptop again and pulled up the CPS site. I filled in dates, names, descriptions, attached photos, medical documents, and the recorded statement. Submitting the report felt strangely calm, like setting down a weight I'd carried since childhood. For 30 years, I'd been the one absorbing the damage. Tonight, for the first time, I stood between my family and my daughter. And whatever happened next, Hazel would not face it alone. I drove to the CPS office in Longmont the morning after submitting the report online. Melissa, the caseworker assigned, sat across from me as I placed the folder on her desk, medical documents, photos, timestamps, and the full recording of Hazel's statement. She listened without interrupting. When Hazel's voice cracked through the speakers, begging them not to write on her face, Melissa paused the audio and looked up. "This is abuse," she said quietly. "We'll move immediately." She opened a formal case for emotional abuse and child endangerment and informed me that CPS would visit both homes where children lived, Brielle's and Connor's. Hearing those words should have felt heavy, but all I felt was clarity. The kind that comes after years of pretending things weren't what they were. That afternoon, CPS knocked on my siblings' doors. I wasn't there, but I didn't have to see it to understand how it played out. Brielle would have scrambled to blame a misunderstanding. Connor would have treated it like a personal insult. Both were placed under monitoring and required to attend parenting classes and anger management training. For the first time, someone outside the family was holding them accountable. The retaliation started within hours. Brielle called first, sobbing, yelling, swinging between begging and threatening. "Max, you need to pull the report. Jace is terrified. CPS humiliated us. Did you ask how Hazel is?" I said. She went silent for a moment, then hung up. Connor called later, furious. "You're tearing this family apart. I'm protecting my daughter," I said, and ended the call. That evening, Brielle rang again, voice sharp. She stood there for a couple hours. "Kids need discipline." I hit record as she talked. It was the first direct admission that Hazel had been punished exactly as she described something Brielle had denied to CPS earlier. The next day, Melissa called me with an update on Connor's home visit. CPS found Maddie boiling water alone, and a meat-cutting knife left on the counter in her reach. Their home was officially marked as unsafe. Connor's outrage filled my voicemail, long sequences of shouting about how CPS had ruined his reputation. What struck me most was how none of them mentioned Hazel. Not once. Not even in passing. I felt anger, yes, but underneath it something steadier. Relief. After years of being guilt-tripped into silence, I wasn't carrying their failures anymore. That night, after Hazel went to sleep, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the CPS paperwork. For the first time, the path ahead felt straight. Logical. Like any medical emergency, identify the threat, remove the threat, secure the patient. I typed into my browser, "Report child endangerment to Police Colorado." The Fort Collins Police Department page loaded. I clicked File a police report, breathed in, and said aloud into the quiet kitchen, "If they want to call me a traitor to this family, fine. I'll betray them all before I let them hurt Hazel again." I drove to the Fort Collins police station on December 29th, carrying the same folder I'd brought to CPS. Officer Daniel met me in the lobby, walked me to a small room, and closed the door gently behind us. I handed him the file. He opened it without rushing, studying each page, each photo. When he reached the audio recording and Hazel's voice filled the room, "Please don't write on my face." He stopped the playback. "This isn't discipline," he said. "It's abuse." He opened a criminal case for child endangerment and assault on a minor. "How far do you want this to go?" he asked. "As far as it needs to," I said, "until Hazel is safe." Within hours, the summonses went out to my parents, Brielle and Connor. The phone call started again. Brielle shrieked, "You turned us into criminals." Connor yelled that officers had questioned him in front of Maddie. Ray accused me of destroying the family's name. Linda called last. Her voice trembled not with guilt, but fear. "Max, the neighbors are talking. They asked why the police came. I can't live like this. Please withdraw the complaint. You're asking me to protect your reputation," I said after you carved a word into my daughter's skin. For the first time, she had nothing to say. 2 days later, I picked Hazel up from her art program. She ran to me, backpack bouncing against her shoulders. As we walked to the car, I heard loud voices near the gate. Jace stood with a cluster of boys bragging. "I pushed her," he said. "She fell like this." He mimed the fall, laughing. And everyone believed me. Easy. Hazel froze beside me. I put a hand on her back, steadying her as if the world had tilted again. Hearing him say it out loud wasn't shocking, it was confirmation of what I already knew. But seeing Hazel hear it was another wound entirely. At home that night, she drew quietly at the coffee table while I opened my email. The police had sent the first summary of their interviews with my family. Every one of them contradicted the others. Their stories fell apart under the smallest pressure. Hazel came over and showed me her drawing another tree, straight and bright with only 2 people under it. "Us again?" I asked. She nodded. "This one doesn't fall either." I watched her walk back to her crayons, small and determined, and I felt something settle inside me, a final unshakable certainty. The real fight was coming. But for the first time, I wasn't walking into it alone in the dark. I had truth evidence and Hazel's hand in mine, and I was ready. The envelope from Fort Collins was waiting on my kitchen counter when I came home from a late shift, plain white, heavy, stamped with the police department seal. For a minute I just stood there, coat still on Hazel's artwork, taped crooked on the fridge in my peripheral vision. Then I tore it open. Inside were copies of the orders, fines, mandatory classes, official warnings. I sat down and read line by line. Linda Vale and Brielle Harper, higher fines required to complete positive parenting and anger management courses. Ray Vale and Connor Vale, smaller fines, formal warnings for child endangerment. A note at the bottom spelled it out, writing degrading words on a child's face, hanging a shaming sign, and denying food over an extended period constituted serious emotional harm. Serious emotional harm. For 30 years, I'd tried to convince myself I was just too sensitive, that the things said and done in that house were normal, that my reaction was the problem. Seeing it in black and white felt like someone finally saying, "You weren't crazy. They were wrong." The calls came fast. Linda's voice was raw. "I'm an old woman with a bad heart, Max. The neighbors saw the patrol car. They look at me like I'm a monster. How could you do this to your own mother?" Ray took the phone. "We're Vales. You're a Vale. You're chopping down your own family tree." Brielle tried a different tactic. "Can't you at least ask them to change the record, keep the fine, but remove the classes? Jace is humiliated. Other parents are talking." Then when I didn't answer fast enough, she grated. "All of this because you can't let one bad night go," Connor just shouted. "I've got a permanent warning now. 1 complaint and CPS is back at my door. You happy? You ruined my life over one stupid kid argument." Through all of it, not one of them said Hazel's name. A few days later, Linda called again. "We should talk in person," she said. "Like a family." Every part of me wanted to say no. But another part, the ER part that likes clean endings, wanted to look at them one last time and set the terms myself. We met at a small cafe near the hospital. Winter pressed against the windows, fogging the glass. They were already there when I walked in. Linda, smaller than I remembered, Ray stiff, Brielle with no makeup, Connor drumming his fingers on the table. No one reached for a hug. They started with the usual lines. "We did our best. Times were different when we raised you. Stress makes people do things they regret. We're the real victims here of this system of your overreactions." I let them talk until Linda said we only punished Hazel so she'd remember. It wasn't that bad. Then I set my phone on the table and hit play. Hazel's voice filled the space between us. "Grandma, please don't write on my face. I'll be good. Please. It hurts." Her sobs crackled through the tiny speaker. No background music, no clinking dishes, just a child begging the people she trusted to stop. No one spoke. Linda's hand flew to her mouth. Brielle looked away. Ray's jaw clenched. Connor stared at the table like he could drill through it. "This," I said quietly, "is what you call not that bad. Every time I start to feel sorry for you, I listen to this and remember exactly what you did." Ray cleared his throat. "So what now? You're just going to cut us off, pretend we're dead?" I'm not pretending anything I said. Here's what's real. There's no more money. No transfers. No camp fees. No repairs. That ended the night you wrote on my kid's face. There's no more Hazel at your house. No visits. No holidays. If you show up at her school or try to pressure her, I will go back to CPS and to the court for a protection order. Max, be reasonable, Linda whispered. We're your parents. You had 30 years to act like it, I said. You failed with me. You don't get a second chance with her. I stood, pulled on my coat. The only thing connecting us now is a last name on a birth certificate. That's it. No one followed me out. For the first time in my life, I didn't turn back to see if they were watching. When I got home, Hazel was at the table drawing another Christmas tree. This one had a star that looked like it might float off the page. Look, Dad, she said. Next year, this one won't fall either. Yeah, I said, pulling her into a hug. Next year, it won't. A year later, our Christmas tree was smaller, cheaper, and meant more to me than any I'd ever seen. Hazel and I had anchored it to the wall with fishing wire just in case, and she'd declared that made it earthquake-proof. She stood on a step stool, carefully hanging a red heart ornament we'd picked out together. This one's us, she said. So if the other ones break, we're still here. The apartment hadn't changed much, same scuffed table, same worn sofa. But the air inside felt different. Lighter. Safe. Hazel's drawings covered the walls now. Snow scenes, animals, a little girl with a fox, and a man in a lab coat holding her hand. News about my family came in sideways through old neighbors or the rare conversation with someone from Fort Collins. Linda and Ray finished their classes and complained to anyone who would listen that parents can't discipline kids anymore. Brielle posted less about her perfect family. Other parents kept their distance after the CPS visit and the fines. Connor learned what things actually cost when he had to pay for his own truck and bills. They sent a few short emails over the year, generic holiday greetings, passive-aggressive Bible verses about forgiveness. I didn't reply. The silence between us grew into something solid and necessary. Hazel's forehead had long since healed, but sometimes on quiet nights she would touch the space above her brows and ask Dad if you hadn't come that night what would have happened. I never lied. I don't know, I'd say. But I know this, I did come. And I always will. She joined an art class and, according to her teacher, had a knack for putting feelings on paper. One day she brought home a drawing that knocked the air out of me, a little girl in front of a straight tree, no sign, no writing. Just a man standing behind her with one hand on her shoulder. No faces, but I knew exactly who they were. After she went to bed that night, I opened a document on my laptop and started typing. Not a legal report this time, but a record for her future self. What happened? What I did wrong? What I did right? Why she grew up without grandparents at school. Concerts. I wrote about the night I found her in the hallway. The CPS office, the police station, the cafe. I wanted her to have a clear answer someday if she ever asked, why didn't we have what other families have? At the bottom of the drawer in my bedroom sat the old cardboard sign, Family Disgrace. I'd kept it without knowing why. That same night I took it out, studied the uneven letters one last time, then tore it into tiny pieces over the trash can. They had spent my whole childhood implying I was the shame of the family. Then they tried to hang that label on my daughter. But I wasn't standing in the same place anymore. I didn't need their approval, and Hazel didn't need their name to know her worth. Outside, snow began to fall soft against the window. Hazel padded out of her room in fuzzy socks, hair messy, eyes bright. "Can we sleep on the couch tonight?" she asked. "To guard the tree. Just in case." I grabbed a blanket and lay down with her on the sofa. We stared up at the ceiling where the colored lights made shaky patterns. Hazel's breathing evened out warm against my shoulder. I thought about the boy I'd been in that old house, always trying to be small enough not to break anything, good enough not to be called a problem. I thought about the man I was now lying under a crooked star with a daughter who knew without question that if someone tried to hurt her, her father would pick her up and walk her out the door. I wasn't waiting for an apology anymore. I wasn't waiting for them to change. I had my own family now. Just two people and one stubborn tree that refused to fall. And for us, that was enough. When everything finally settled after the police reports, the CPS evaluations, the court-ordered classes, the fines, the endless phone calls that eventually stopped coming, I found myself sitting alone in the quiet of my apartment one night long after Hazel had drifted off to sleep. The Christmas lights on our small tree blinked slowly, casting soft reflections across the living room. It wasn't a big place. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the kind of home that wins admiration from the outside. But for the first time in my life, it felt like safety. It felt like something I had spent 3 decades searching for, a place where no one had to earn their worth, prove their innocence, or fight for permission to simply exist without being shamed. And maybe that's the real ending, not the legal documents, not the confrontation, not the punishments handed down to the people who hurt my daughter. But this, the moment I finally understood what family actually means. You'd think it would be obvious, right? You'd think the word itself would explain its purpose. But for some of us, we grow up in homes where family is a performance, a reputation, a facade polished for the neighbors. Some of us grow up learning that love is conditional, that affection is earned by being useful, that loyalty is measured by how quietly you endure mistreatment. Some of us are praised only when we remain small, obedient, invisible. And then we become adults walking wounds shaped like people still holding on to the hope that maybe if we try harder, they'll finally see us. Finally hear us. Finally love us the way they insist they always have. I used to believe that. I used to cling to it like a promise. But that night when I walked into my parents' house and saw my daughter standing alone in a dark hallway with a sign around her neck, I felt something inside me break clean in half. Not in a painful way, not in the way wounds split open, but in the way a chain snaps after decades of tension. A clean break, a necessary break. People often say that becoming a parent teaches you about love, but sometimes it teaches you about truth. It teaches you what you will and will not tolerate. It forces you to decide who you must protect and who you must walk away from. Protecting Hazel made the choice for me. I've replayed that night 1,000 times, the cold air outside, the warm cruelty inside Hazel's trembling voice, the way her small fingers clutched my sleeve as if she wasn't sure I was real. And each time I replay it, I come back to the same realization: none of this should have happened. Not to me as a kid, not to her as a child, not in any world where adults remember what it means to care, to soften, to guide. For months after the incident, I wrestled with guilt. Guilt for taking Hazel there. Guilt for ignoring the red flags that had been waving at me since childhood. Guilt for waiting so long to stand up for myself. Guilt for letting them get so close to her that they stained her memories of Christmas with fear instead of warmth. But healing doesn't begin with blaming yourself. It begins with acknowledging the truth: you didn't deserve the pain that shaped you, and your child certainly didn't deserve to inherit it. Hazel healed faster than I did. Kids do that. They bounce, adapt, rebuild. She went back to drawing, laughing, dreaming, as if her spirit understood something long before I did, that our home, small as it was enough. That having one safe parent is better than 10 unsafe relatives. That peace is better than belonging to the wrong people. There were days I questioned myself. Days I wondered if cutting ties was too harsh. Days when the silence left behind by my family's absence echoed louder than their shouting ever did. But then Hazel would run into the room with a new drawing, or curl up beside me with her head against my arm, or whisper, "Dad, I love our Christmas tree." And I'd be reminded of the truth: I didn't break a family. I ended a cycle. And sometimes ending a cycle is the most loving thing a person can do, not just for themselves, but for every generation that comes after. Now, when I think of my parents' house, I no longer feel the gravitational pull of obligation. I feel distance, clarity, maybe even something like closure. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever. But closure, the kind that comes when you understand that you cannot save people who refuse to see their own reflection. And you know what? I'm not angry anymore. Not in the same way. The anger has burned itself out, leaving something sharper, quieter, steadier: conviction. The knowledge that I did the right thing. The knowledge that Hazel sleeps without fear. The knowledge that my home, our home, is no longer a battlefield. I don't know how my story sounds to you. Maybe it sounds harsh. Maybe it sounds brave. Maybe it sounds like something you've lived yourself. And if it does, if any part of this feels familiar, then I'm sorry. Truly. No one deserves to learn the meaning of family through pain. But if you're standing where I stood wondering if you're overreacting, wondering if you're allowed to protect yourself or your child from the people who share your blood, let me tell you something gently from one human being to another. You're allowed. You're allowed to walk away. You're allowed to choose peace. You're allowed to build a smaller, safer world. You're allowed to redefine family from scratch. And if no one has ever told you this before, I will. Blood is not the price of love, and love is not meant to bruise. Tonight the apartment is quiet again. Hazel is asleep, curled under her blanket with her stuffed fox tucked beside her. The tree is lit steady and bright. It hasn't fallen once, not this year, not last year. It stands because we made sure it would. Because we built something new, something stable, something that won't tilt or collapse the moment weight leans the wrong way. Maybe that's the perfect metaphor for where life has taken us: a tree that doesn't fall, a home that holds, a father who learned the difference between tradition and harm, a daughter who knows she's loved without condition. Before I end this, before I close this chapter for good, I want to ask something from you, not out of desperation or a need for validation, but because stories like this only matter when they're heard by people who understand them. If you're here with me right now, if you've followed me through every moment of this story, would you drop a listening or a simple hi in the comments, or maybe just tell me where you're watching from? Sometimes the smallest signal from another human being reminds us we're not alone in this huge, echoing world. And if this story touched you at all, if it made you think or feel or remember something you've buried, consider subscribing to the channel. Not for numbers, not for popularity, but so you and I can keep walking together through stories that hurt, stories that heal, stories that remind us of who we are and who we can be. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for letting this story land somewhere soft. And wherever you are tonight, whatever your tree looks like, however your home feels, I hope you find your own version of a Christmas that doesn't fall. I've been sitting here for a while, watching the lights flicker across the wall, thinking about how strange healing really is. People talk about it like it's a straight path, as if one day you simply wake up and everything that hurt you has dissolved into the air. But that isn't how it works. Not for me. Not for anyone who's ever carried the weight of a childhood filled with silence or shame or uncertainty. Healing sneaks up on you in small, ordinary moments. It arrives quietly, without congratulations or applause. It looks like Hazel reaching for my hand in the grocery store without flinching. It looks like me not bracing myself when the phone rings. It looks like walking past a mirror and seeing a man instead of a collection of old wounds. And maybe the biggest sign of healing is this: I stopped hoping my family would turn into people they are not. Stopped expecting apologies they will never offer. Stopped rehearsing the speech I used to dream of giving, the one where they suddenly understand everything and say all the right words. I don't need that speech anymore. Silence, it turns out, can be its own kind of closure. Sometimes I still wonder if Hazel will ask about them when she's older. Maybe she will. Maybe she won't. But when that day comes, I'll tell her the truth, not the cruel version, not the sugar-coated one, just the clear, steady truth that she deserved better, and I chose better for her. And if she ever doubts herself, I'll remind her that the worth of a child is not measured by the failure of adults. What matters now is what we're building together. What matters now is the life taking shape inside these four walls. What matters now is that Hazel falls asleep each night knowing she is safe and wanted two things I didn't always have growing up. And maybe that's why this story feels bigger than just one Christmas night. Because it's not only about what was taken from us, it's about what we're reclaiming. Our future, our peace, our right to live gently in a world that hasn't always been gentle to us. So if you're still here sitting somewhere with your phone or your laptop, maybe late at night like me, maybe with a soft light on in the corner, I want you to know something: your story matters too. Whatever you carried, whatever you survived, whatever part of you is still stitching itself back together, you deserve softness. You deserve safety. You deserve people who don't make you earn love like it's a prize. And if you'd like to stay for more stories that dig into the hard places but come back up toward the light, feel free to subscribe. I'd be grateful to have you here. And if you're comfortable, leave a comment. Tell me where you're listening from. I read every message. I really do. Thank you for sharing this space with me tonight. Thank you for letting me finish this story in your presence. And wherever you are, whatever you're facing, I hope the year ahead brings you a kind of peace that stays.